I am Michael Shermer. I'm the publisher of Skeptic magazine, which looks like this. It's a print magazine and a digital magazine. And my latest book is on conspiracy theories and conspiracies, which we'll be talking about today. Skeptic is a science magazine that deals with science and pseudoscience and quasi-science and bad science and conspiracy theories and cults and all kinds of claims that are controversial on the margins of science. That's kind of our specialty. And here are some of the back issues we've tackled. Themes like gender and abortion, race, nationalism, economics, energy, like nuclear power, education reform, health matters, and so on. So we're quarterly. You can go to skeptic.com and just kind of get an idea of what we do. One of the things that we do consistently since we started the magazine in 1992 are conspiracy theories. They're hugely popular everywhere in the world. And in terms of the themes of this conference, conspiracy theories are some of the most divisive ideas that anyone has ever come up with that makes it difficult to kind of approach or have as a goal the theme of this conference, that is kind of unification, and it's all moving toward the same goals of human progress and flourishing around the world, and to attenuate or reduce the amount of political divisiveness. Conspiracy theories are very divisive. So I undertook to write a book about this because I think it's important. And as a scientist, we have to start off with definitions. What do we mean by conspiracies and conspiracy theories and so on? Like, what is a conspiracy? What's a conspiracy theory? And what is a conspiracy theorist or a conspiracist? You'll hear people say things like, oh, that's just one of those crazy conspiracy theories, or that's just one of those crazy conspiracies. Those aren't the same thing, but people get confused and they just throw these words out. Really, they mean it in a rather pejorative sense. It's a crazy story, it's a false story, you're delusional if you believe this, that sort of thing. So the subtitle of my book is Why the Rational Believe the Irrational. So my argument is going to be it's actually not that irrational to believe conspiracy theories are true. And the short answer that we'll get to by the end of the talk is because enough of them are true, because there really are conspiracies, that it pays or it is rational to believe more of them are true than actually are. So then it just becomes a question of, well, which are the ones that are true and which are the ones that are not true? So then it's a signal detection problem. There's a lot of noise out there. We're looking for the signal. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. Which ones are the true ones? Which ones are the false ones? Which ones are, we just don't know. All right, so we're going to start with our definitions. A conspiracy is two or more people plotting or acting in secret to gain an advantage or to harm others. Okay, does this ever happen anywhere in life? Yeah, it happens all the time. Government agencies do this, corporations do this, groups of humans of any kind, in anywhere in the world, all the way through history, have done things like this. So we evolved a cognition, I'm going to argue, to be a little on the paranoid side, just in case they really are after you, because sometimes they really are after you. Usually not, but sometimes they are, right? So conspiracies, two or more people acting in secret to gain an unfair advantage over somebody else, okay? And this is as defined, either we think it's immoral or it's illegal. A conspiracy theory is just an idea about that. It's a structured belief that a conspiracy is happening. Whether or not it's real is a separate question. So when somebody says, I have a conspiracy theory, okay, what is it? Before I decide if I think it's true or if I think it's false or I don't really know, I just want to know what your theory is. So that's a separate thing from a conspiracy itself. And then a conspiracy theorist or a conspiracist is just somebody who holds a conspiracy theory. Just somebody who thinks a conspiracy theory is about a real conspiracy. At least they think it's real. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, that we need to just drop the language that an idea is a crazy conspiracy theory. Just drop that. it might be a real conspiracy theory, in which case, I mean, it may represent a real conspiracy, in which case it's not completely crazy. There may be a rationality behind it. Okay, so whether or not it's real is a separate question from what is the claim being made. Okay, so let's go through some of the types of conspiracy theories that there are. I have a whole chapter on sort of classifying the different kinds of conspiracy theories. There are so many of them, we have to have a whole classificatory system. So there's aviation conspiracy theories, like black helicopters that are, secret spies or government agents or something like this that are doing nefarious things in various parts of countries. Chemtrails, you've seen jets fly, right next to the airport here. Once the jet gets way up there, there's contrails behind it, which is just the vapor from the jet engine interacting with the atmosphere. But a lot of people think actually there are chemicals in those contrails, so they're chemtrails, in which the government or corporations or they or somebody is spraying chemicals all over the land out of these jets, okay? Or there are anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. In fact, in the history of conspiracism, probably the Jews are doing something nefarious has to be the oldest and the most nefarious. From the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which was a Russian hoax document around the turn of the 20th century, to Holocaust denial in post-World War II. Holocaust never happened. To even more recently, the accusation of Israel being a settler colonial state that's illegal and plotting to destroy native peoples in their homelands, and so on. That's all since October 7th. We've seen a lot of conspiracy theories around the Jews and what they're doing, or Israel as representing something like the Jews. Aliens, of course, is a perennial favorite. Everybody loves aliens. Area 51, the crash in Roswell, the alien abductions, UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial or anomalous phenomenon. You've all heard about these. There are endless conspiracy theories about them. Again, they may be real. Maybe there are aliens. Maybe it's Russian drones. Maybe it's Chinese technology. But the question is it true or not? That's what we want to know. There are biblical conspiracy theories, who really wrote the Gospels, who really wrote the Old Testament. What do these stories actually mean? And if you want to go full Dan Brown with the Da Vinci Code, you can have a conspiracy theory about how Jesus didn't really die on the cross. He was put in a coma and whisked off out of the tomb after 3 days when he woke up out of his coma and went off to France and married Mary Magdalene, and they had children, and their descendants are still with us. This is a popular novel and film, but it was actually based on a 1970s book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which was a nonfiction book. That this was an actual conspiracy theory about the secret origins of Christianity. Deaths of famous people are just ripe with conspiracy theories. Who really killed JFK or RFK or MLK? Or you've probably seen RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., talking in the last 6 months or so about how the CIA murdered his uncle and his father, JFK and RFK. Or Jimmy Hoffa, or Princess Diana, or Kurt Cobain. Anybody that's famous that dies young is inevitably going to have some sort of conspiracy theories surrounding their deaths. It's difficult for us to accept the death of people we love or famous people before their time. Of course, government conspiracy theories are rampant because, again, some of them are true. False flag operations, or 9/11 was an inside job by the Bush administration. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency of the U.S. government that sends money in to help people that have been hit by disasters. And so there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about what they're actually secretly really doing with those funds and with those agents and so on. Medical conspiracy theories. Back in the 1950s, dentists discovered that if you put a little bit of fluoride in the public drinking water, it reduces the number of cavities dramatically. So the government said, all right, we're going to put fluoride in everybody's water. So that then launched conspiracy theories about what they were actually really secretly putting in the water and so on. And of course, since COVID-19 pandemic, we've had tons of conspiracy theories about vaccinations, or as you probably know, the origins of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Was it a zoonotic accidental spillover, or was it a byproduct of a lab leak that went wrong from tinkering with the genetics of the virus and so on? There's lots of conspiracy theories that are very popular now about that. The anti-vaxxers have been around really for over a century. They were very popular in the 1990s, that vaccines cause autism. And here's a clue about why people believe conspiracy theories. We don't know the cause of autism. There's clearly a genetic component to it, but there's also neurological or biochemical elements, perhaps even in the fetus stage. We just don't know. So whenever there's a lack of knowledge about something big and bad is happening, we don't know why it's happening, that opens the door to conspiracy theories and everybody having an idea about that. Secret organizations are very popular for conspiracy theories. The Federal Reserve, the World Bank, the Bilderberger Group, the International Monetary Fund, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations and the European Union, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the New World Order, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Zionist occupation government, even Davos, there's, in Switzerland. Heck, there's probably conspiracy theories about what we're really doing here at the World Knowledge Forum, secretly meeting in this room to plot some nefarious thing. People on the outside who don't know what people on the inside are actually doing then tend to concoct conspiracy theories about it. All right, let's do two more cuts on the classification system. I divide up what I call realistic conspiracy theories. That is, that they probably are real, or there's a chance that they could be real because they're not completely crazy. So government agencies or corporate entities trying to consolidate power, secretly lying or conniving to get more money or power. This happens all the time. Personal profiteering, tax cheating schemes, regulatory capture. I don't know if you followed this story, but there's a massive crisis with drug addiction in the United States. From the fentanyl and the opioid crisis and so on. This was all instituted through this company, a drug company called the Sackler family, called Purdue Pharmaceutical, where they basically paid off the regulators to not monitor too closely what these painkillers were actually doing and how addictive they actually were. And we now know that they knew years ahead of time that these were very addictive drugs and that people were dying from the use of these drugs and their addictions, and they didn't care. They just went after the profits, and now they're paying billions of dollars in fines for this. But that is a conspiracy. By definition, two or more people plotting in secret to gain an unfair advantage that's illegal over somebody else. This happens all the time. Insider trading for stock markets, tax avoiding plots, and so on. Then there's paranoid conspiracy theories. So that there are evil forces at work in the world domination schemes. Bill Gates wants to control the entire world. Okay, that's not really very realistic. No one can do that. Running the entire world's economies, determining political elections. There's every election anywhere in the world where it's close, the losing side and their supporters thinks the other side cheated. This happens every election. Normally, the losing side eventually gives up and says, all right, we'll just focus on the next election. But not always, as we've seen in recent years. QAnon exposed a satanic pedophile ring. I don't know how much of this you followed. But there was, for several years during the Trump administration, the idea that there's a deep state of people working in the government to do nefarious things, of which Donald Trump was going to expose what the deep state was really doing. And he was leaking out information about the cabal through this QAnon. QAnon is this, well, we still don't know exactly who it was, but we have a pretty good idea. It might have even been more than one person. Leaking little clues online, mostly on Twitter/X, about what was really going on. This led all the way to a scandal called Pizzagate. The belief that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, and maybe some Hollywood celebrities like Tom Hanks and Beyonce, were secretly running a child pedophile ring out of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C., a pizzeria called Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria. Does anybody really believe that this was going on? Well, one guy did. His name is Edgar Welch. He drove 3.5 hours to the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria with a rifle to go into the basement to break up the pedophile ring because he thought this was a crime going on. So he gets there and he goes, "Where's the basement?" And they go, "There is no basement." He's like, "Uh-oh, maybe I was wrong about this." And he shot a few bullets into the ceiling. He was arrested. He went to prison for several years and realized what a bad mistake. That was a conspiracy theory that turned out not to be true. The worst, nefarious one that's still going on is that 9/11 was an inside job. I will come back to that in a little bit. But the idea is that it was an inside job by the Bush administration. All right, then there's a few others. Who are these conspiracy theorists? Well, a lot of them are that it's an enemy from outside your country. These foreigners are coming in to take our jobs or to plant drugs and do nefarious things to our citizens. Or the enemy within. There are secret people. Usually it's some minority group that's picked on. If not the Jews, it's in our country, it's the Mexicans, or in a century ago, it was the Germans or the Italians. Always people coming into our country or our group to do something bad. Then there's the enemies above, people in power, politicians, billionaires. They're doing something to the rest of us. Or the enemy is below. The poor people, or the minority people, or the marginalized people. They're plotting in secret to do something to our group. As you can see, you can find conspiracy theories almost anywhere. They are universal. And who believes them? In short, everybody. So decades of surveys about conspiracy theories and who believes them shows that pretty much everybody believes at least one conspiracy theory, and most people believe many conspiracy theories. So that tells us something. It can't be that they're ignorant or uneducated or delusional. If everybody believes it, then and there's a normal bell curve of intelligence and education and so on, there must be something else going on. That's what I'm getting at here. All right, characteristics of conspiracists. Again, if everybody believes them, how can we break it down a little bit? It's a good book on this, Joseph Usensky and Joseph Parent, American Conspiracy Theories. Cut across gender, age, race, income, political affiliation, educational level, occupational status. In other words, there's no difference between men and women, say, on how conspiratorially minded they are, or blacks and whites, or liberals and conservatives, or highly educated people versus poorly educated people, or what jobs you have. Pretty much everybody, again, believes something. Liberals, for example, tend to be suspicious about the media and political parties as being bought off by rich capitalists and billionaires. Conservatives tend to believe that academics and liberal elites control the media and politics. So it's not like liberals are more conspiratorially minded than conservatives or vice versa, but your political affiliation directs you which kind of conspiracy theory are you more likely to believe. And it's usually that the other guys are doing something bad. Interestingly, on education, you would think more educated people would be more rational about this. There's a little effect. 42% of those without a high school diploma score high in conspiracism versus 22% of those with postgraduate degrees. But that 1 in 5, 20% of people with PhDs or master's degrees or medical degrees or law degrees believe in conspiracies tells us it's not just a matter of education or intelligence. Something else is going on here. What is that something else? Okay, now let's delve into the psychology of conspiracism. So I'm going to do two cuts. One is more proximate explanation, psychological, cognitive, social, emotional factors that are going on that make you more or less conspiratorially minded. You, me, everybody. And then a deeper cut in a few minutes on what I think is the deeper effect going on here that makes people more conspiratorially minded. So I start with the proportionality bias. And this has to do with the mismatch between the size or an importance of an event and its cause. So big events should have big causes, little events, little causes, right? So for example, we might look at the Holocaust and go, well, that's one of the worst things that's ever happened in human history. The extermination of around 6 million Jews and others by the Nazi regime. And who did it? The Nazis, one of the worst political regimes in human history. So there's kind of a harmony there, a balance. Like that kind of makes sense. This is a horrible thing, and these were horrible people and had a lot of power. That makes sense, right? What bothers people is things like famous people like JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, assassinated by lone assassins. That just doesn't feel right. It's like, this guy's famous and powerful, and who killed him? This Lee Harvey Oswald, this complete nobody, this total loser, this kind of dropout of, how could somebody like that pull it off? We've seen this with the Princess Diana death. The cause of Princess Diana's death, we know, absolutely. Drunk driving, speeding, and she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Tens of thousands of people die every year on highways around the world from those causes. But it doesn't feel right that a princess, a famous, beautiful, and so on and so forth, it feels like that should be something more. That the royal family had to be behind it, or the MI5 or MI6, or some nefarious group wanted her dead, or she was pregnant by Jody Fayed, her boyfriend, and this must have been happening, and that must have been happening. Okay, there's no evidence for any of those alternative causes. Jody Fayed's father, who was a billionaire, owner of Harrods in London, and so on, he spent years and millions of dollars trying to find the real killers of his son and Princess Diana, and never turned up anything, right? But it just feels wrong, right? Or I'll hear this about 9/11. You're telling me that 19 guys with box cutters pulled off one of the greatest conspiracies of all time, brought down the World Trade Center buildings and attacked the Pentagon and destroyed the American economy that spent hundreds of billions of dollars in wars after that? You telling me 19 guys with box cutters pulled that off? And the answer is, yeah, that's what I'm telling you. Because A, that's what the evidence shows, and B, that is the only way it could happen. All right? It has to be a lone nut, a nobody, somebody that's kind of invisible to society. People don't even see what's going on there, as opposed to some vast, deep conspiracy involving hundreds of people that would be more likely to be discovered, right? But that's that proportionality bias there. All right, let me wrap up by just saying a few words about the deeper reason why people, I think, believe conspiracy theories. I have 3 levels of this: proxy conspiracism, tribal conspiracism, and constructive conspiracism, okay? Proxy conspiracism is where the conspiracy theory is a proxy for a deeper type of truth. Something you think about the world that's actually going on. Whether the conspiracy theory is true or not exactly is less important than what it represents. And then there's tribal conspiracism, where the conspiracy theory reinforces truths about what your tribe or your party or your religion or your ideology believes. And so you just go along with it. Like most people, polls show that a lot of conservatives believe the QAnon Pizzagate thing, but only one person actually did something about it, the guy that went there with the gun, right? I think most people just go, yeah, I think that's the kind of thing Hillary would do. Whatever. I don't know if she actually did it, but those Democrats, they would do something bad like that, even if they didn't do that particular one. That's a kind of tribal conspiracism. And then the third one, the rational behind the irrational, is that there's some element of truth to it that it pays to believe just in case. This is my better safe than sorry. So again, a proxy for a different type of truth. The details are less important than what it actually stands for. Some fear of power that people have, or the idea that there's somebody behind the scenes pulling the strings, that everything happens for a reason. My popular example that I use for this is the O.J. trial. Everybody who watched this knows O.J. did it, killed his wife and her friend, and the bloody glove and all that stuff. There's just tons of evidence for it. But if you actually look at the history of African Americans, particularly in Los Angeles where this happened, African Americans don't trust the police. O.J. was acquitted based on a conspiracy theory that the police planted the bloody glove. They planted the blood splatters in the car and so forth. But the fact is, the police did used to do things like that in the 1950s and 60s in Southern California, particularly Los Angeles. The relations between the police and the African American community in Los Angeles has not been good historically. So what I'm arguing is that there's a kind of rationality for African Americans to not trust the government and the police for very good reasons, right? So by the time you get to the 90s, the distrust is already there, right? And then finally, constructive conspiracism again, just to reinforce this point one last time. It pays to err on the side of belief just in case. And that we evolved our conspiratorial cognition. Again, we just evolved in these small bands of hunter-gatherers of a few dozen to a few hundred people in which there were often nefarious things going on. People outside of our group, other tribes are dangerous. Maybe some coalitions within our group we don't trust. So it pays to be a little paranoid. And this has to do with the negativity bias, or why bad is stronger than good. There's cognitive psych research on this, that bad things hurt twice as much as good things feel good. This first emerged in studies on behavioral economics. You want to get to somebody to make an investment in some company or stock or whatever. The payoff has to be twice as good as what the loss would feel, because losses hurt twice as much as gains feel good. So our cognition is tuned to negative things. There's an asymmetry between good and bad. Progress is mostly made incrementally in small steps. Regress can come about in one colossal calamity. What are the things you should look for in figuring this out? First of all, I'm just going to give you a handful of things. What are the kinds of questions you should ask when you hear somebody go, I have a conspiracy theory? All right, let's hear it. And then they tell you, then you can ask, well, how many people would need to be involved? The more people have to be involved in a conspiracy, the more likely they're going to screw up or change their mind or tell somebody and so on. Ben Franklin famously said, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Right? People can't keep their mouth shut. They screw up. They're not very competent, and so on. How many elements must come together to pull it all off at just the right time? And related to that, how perfect needs to be the timing of all the people. Okay, now you go over here, and then and 3 minutes later, you're going to go over there, and then you have the gun, and then you have the hand grenade, and then you're going to do this, and everybody in the room has to have be in the right place at the right time. What are the chances of that happening? Pretty slim. But if I only need you 2 and you, maybe we could pull it off, just 3 people, right? So the more people, the more elements, the more timing. And how big is the conspiracy theory? Again, Bill Gates has orchestrated the vaccination of billions of people around the world so he could chip us all and control us and know exactly what we're doing all the time with an electronic chip. Well, guess what? These tech companies are already doing this. They're called cell phones. You all have one in your pocket. They know exactly where you are and what your shopping preferences are. Anyway, it's a little joke. But grand conspiracy theories like that are not likely to be true. Okay. So just think about 9/11 as an inside job. How would this be pulled off? Okay. The theory is that the World Trade Center buildings were demolished by intentionally planted explosive devices. We've all seen videos of buildings that are intentionally demolished. And it takes weeks ahead of time. Hundreds of workers go in there and they plant all the explosive devices and they time it all out, and boom, 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 the building comes collapsing down. And that's what a lot of people who watch those videos, you've all seen them, think is what happened, okay? How did these people get into the World Trade Center buildings, break through the drywall, into the structural beams, and plant the explosive devices? How did they do that? Oh, they went in under the pretense of elevator repair. Into the walls where there's no elevators? And, these are heavily guarded buildings. How did hundreds of people that don't work there, that don't have, a tag with a little barcode on it to scan to get into the building, how did they do that? And we all saw the planes hit the buildings. So if explosive devices had to be planted in just the right floors, they would have had to know ahead of time which floors the planes were going to hit, because that's, if you watch the videos, the buildings collapse at the place where the planes hit the building. That's where the collapse starts. So they would have had to know ahead of time which floors. And not just which floors, but the planes hit at an angle. So between floors 102 and 110. And so the people that are there weeks ahead of time would have had to know how this was going to happen. And how did they fly those planes? Well, so they were remotely controlled. Where were the pilots and the passengers? They took them all off secretly ahead of time. They flew them to Canada and got rid of the passengers and then flew the planes back with remote control. It goes on and on and on like this, except there are one group of people, they're called the no-planers. They don't think there are any planes at all, and this was all done with fake CGI video. Okay, you get the idea. This is so out there, so crazy. You can put this into the false box or category. And then finally, real conspiracy theories happen. Lincoln was assassinated by a conspiracy. Probably the most famous deadly conspiracy in history was the one that triggered the First World War, in which a conspiratorial cabal of assassins called the Black Hand conspired to assassinate the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand when he was in Sarajevo. I have a whole chapter on this because it's an incredible story about how this unfolded. There really was like these 7 assassins, and they had the whole thing coordinated, but it's how it typically goes. One guy went to the wrong house to get his gun. Another guy chickened out, I don't want to do this. Another guy got lost. Another guy's gun jammed. Another hand grenade didn't go off. It bounced off the car and landed on this other car. And then the Archduke went to his speech, and then he went back to check on how his comrades were doing, and they went back on the parade route, and the car got stuck and had to go backwards because it made a wrong turn, and it just happened to stop right in front of the last conspiracist who's standing there with his pistol in his pocket. And there it is. There's the Archduke right there. Bam, done. That's how things usually go. Just totally random, accidental thing, and that led to the deaths of 10 million people after World War I, right? And this is my favorite picture to capture this. Supposedly, all the assassins there in Dealey Plaza that shot at Kennedy are in that photo, all right? I can't see any of them. Supposedly, here they are located on all these little circles over there. These are just shadows. These are random patterns in the noise. There's nothing actually there, but it's symbolic, I think, of conspiracism. So that's why I think the rational believe the irrational. Thank you so much.